it sounds like 5 years into the partnership strategy specifically. How much revenue has that accounted for in your business?
It came to about $230,000.
Hey, Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the interview for this week. I say, let's just go ahead and jump right in. So why don't you tell everyone what you do and who do you help?
Yeah, I'm Laura Lopuch, and I'm a cold email and partnership pitch expert. And I basically help service providers, freelancers, solopreneurs, those one-person businesses, write effective cold emails to help them get more clients without like the content marketing time suck, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the product like? Are you that done for you? Is it a coaching program?
It's a coaching program. It's actually a hybrid of like a program. So video training, bite-sized video training mixed with group coaching and one-on-one coaching. So it's like this cool blend of both worlds, because a lot of times, myself included, we kind of buy a course and we think that the purchase solves the problem without actually taking action. And I got really tired of seeing that happen in my world, for me personally, and then also for my clients. So I wanted to give everybody some accountability, and that's kind of where the coaching aspect comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. The accountability is totally key.
Yeah.
So what's the price point for that?
It's currently at 7,500. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And I think I saw on your website it's a longer program too.
It is. It's currently at 6 months. So you can kind of like, I find that a lot of times cold emails there's a lot of mind games that you kind of play with yourself. And so I wanted a program that was longer so that we could kind of work on that head trash that you might be bringing to the table around cold emails and being visible and like, who am I? Who am I to pitch? That kind of thing. I find that that's like the number one deterrent for people when it comes to cold emails, especially partnerships. Like, who am I to talk about this thing? Like, I've only been doing it X amount of years. And yeah, so I wanted something longer to help people with that.
That's super interesting. You wouldn't expect that mindset is like a core piece of sending good cold email.
It's such a core piece. And it's like, and it doesn't ever go away. I've just accepted it as like part of the process. Like even me, I've been sending cold emails since the start of my business 8 years ago. I'm actually coming up on my 8-year anniversary at the end of April. And so I've been thinking about like my journey and kind of getting reminiscent and nostalgic a little bit, but that like mind trash still comes up like 8 years into sending cold emails. And I've been doing it for 8 years solid. So it's just part of the process, and you just have to learn how to deal with it, get past it, and keep going. And that's sometimes the hardest part, is just how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's super cool. I want to come back to that because that's really
Okay.
interesting to me. And you've had tremendous success for yourself for cold email, which is where we're going to get into. But just like, where are you running your business from? What's your life like, and what's it been like running this business for you too? Like, how's that changed things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and my business has changed a lot over the past 8 years. When I started, I had quit my full-time job as a paralegal in a law firm, like blaze of glory, lots of swear words involved.
Was it really?
I'm never blah, 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 that kind of thing.
Wow.
So I was never going back to that world. And I had like one client who's paid me like $200 on a good month. And I had a huge fear of cold calling, like picking up the phone, being rejected on a phone call. So I started cold emailing because I didn't have no budget, no referrals, no network, no nothing. So I started cold emailing, and it took about 4 months for things to finally start getting traction. And at that point, I signed what would become a $20,000 client. Fast forward a year, I had my first son, and then things had to shift again with adding a baby, and how do you balance being a full-time parent with being a one-person business? What does that look like? I don't have any family in the area, and I wanted to be there to witness a lot of my son growing up. So how could I do that? And then that kind of started me on the next chapter of my journey, which is like the partnership pitches. And I realized that pitching partnerships was really key to finding that balance between minimum time input and like maximum ROI on the other side. And we can talk a lot more about that if you want to. But that's kind of where my business is right now, where I usually work like 8 to 10 hours a week, a full
Wow.
time, to like three little boys under 7. And yeah, I don't hustle a lot. I believe a lot in like, where am I inputting quality amount of time to get really max results?
Hmm. I think that's a super refreshing perspective to hear.
Thanks.
Yeah. Um, wow. And I mean, let's jump into it because fast forward and like I hear you just landed a really big partnership, still doing the cold email, and in that
Yeah.
partnership vein, like you said, which has been more efficient for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I did just land a really big partnership with Gemma Barden Carter. And we did actually two different kind of partnerships together. One where I did like a workshop inside of her paid community, and then I appeared on her podcast, which was also huge. And both of those were really cool. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, like, how did you identify her as someone you wanted to pitch, and what was your intention going into that?
Yeah. It kind of just evolved naturally. I know I hate it when people say that, but if you're kind of paying attention to places where you can pitch people and like form a partnership, it seems like you'll start to notice those. And it's actually your brain at work. It's called confirmation bias. It's really cool. And if you start paying attention to one specific thing, your brain will start recognizing that and popping it up in different parts of your life. So I actually joined her community. It was about 2 years ago. I joined that paid community. To build out an evergreen funnel. And I was going through her community, her program and stuff, and I realized she had a lot of partnership like workshops and collaborations with other creators to kind of fill the gaps so she didn't have to create the content herself, which I thought was super smart. And then she put on like a webinar herself about how she's used partnerships and collaborations to grow. But she didn't address the like how, like, well, what do you say in the email? How do you make it not sleazy? And I was like, that I can fill that gap for her. So that's what I
Mm,
pitched her. And by that time, yeah, I wasn't actually part of the community, but I knew I'd been part of her world enough that I knew how to pitch her and how to be really relevant and make it a win-win for both of us.
yeah. Okay, so you identified her as someone who was teaching your audience,
Yep.
a similar audience, I'm sure, and
Yeah.
she was also talking about partnerships, and then you had the gap there. It's interesting that she's someone that you had bought a product from earlier too, because I think oftentimes that feels like someone who might be out of reach.
I know. And honestly, I was that mind trash again. Like I was a little bit intimidated, like pitching her because I was like, who am I? Like she's like named like this entrepreneur of the year award by Entrepreneur Magazine. And she's like this big shindig hot dog, like whatever you want to call her.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was after I sent her the pitch email, she replied and she's like, I'm on your list and I love what you're doing. I love this journey that you're on. I'm currently on like a journey to make 200,000 working 12 hours a week or less. And she's like, I love this journey you're on. And I was like, wait, what? You get my emails? Like you read my stuff? And she had joined my list because of a partnership I'd done like a year previous,
Oh
which
wow,
was
no
really
way.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's super interesting. And so
Yeah.
she had been following you, and you originally reached out. What's the first partnership that you did, and how did you guys go about setting that up?
The first partnership was the webinar,
Okay.
and it was what I had pitched her originally.
Okay.
But because I was part of her paid community for a while and one of her students,
Mm,
she wanted to bring me on her podcast to kind of talk about that side of things as well
okay.
and not just have me teach.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, how'd it go? Like, what were the results?
It went really well. It just kind of got executed on at the beginning of the year, kind of just like at February. So results are still kind of coming in. The
Okay.
cool thing is that I've already gotten like invited to do like another webinar inside another paid community, which historically for me has been a great source of like future clients and at the price point that I'm looking for. And they also tend to show up in a really strong way, those clients. So I'm excited to like see where it kind of leads. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. How many people like did you teach to? How big was that audience?
Let's see. I'm not really sure, because I did like a live recording, like a live version.
Mm.
I'm not sure how many people showed up to that 20-ish. And then she posted the recording inside the paid community, which is much bigger than 20. It's like got to be like in the hundreds. So I'm not sure how many people have watched it. I don't have insight into that, or will watch it. Also don't have insight, but I do know that like I put like a lead gen, like a landing page link inside there. So if people want to get templates of the stuff I'm talking about, they
Mm.
can then join my list, and that's where I'm measuring on my side.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So, so you do that, and you said you've already got other partnerships inside of paid memberships. Do you think that's because of this one that you did? Like other people who are in there seeing that?
This one has been, yep. I
Okay.
got like an invite off of like a welcome email in my sequence saying, "Hey, I'd love for you to do this webinar, maybe change out the examples, but this webinar for my people." But I actually have been getting invited into to do like presentations inside paid communities for the past like I want to say like 4 or 5 years actually. And
Okay.
it's super interesting to see that that partnership is still bringing in really high quality leads for me, even like 5 years later. For
Wow.
example, yeah, one partnership I did like 5 years ago brought in like 70 new people into my world just in like 2022, and that's like 5 years after the fact. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's wild. So, I mean, do you have anything else that's a compound effect like that, or is partnerships, you know, the thing that pays the longest dividends, like after you do them?
I think it's definitely partnerships. I think of partnerships as like investing. It's not sexy, and it's kind of like a little bit of hard work up front.
Hmm.
But like once you start getting in a routine, once you start investing like regularly, like pitching regularly,
Yeah.
you literally open up all these little windows. I think of them little windows that people can kind of come into your world through, and
Mm.
they're always open. Even if the podcast stops recording new episodes, those episodes, the ones that you did like 2 years, 4 years ago, live on forever on the internet. And people will still find that episode, still listen, still come into your world through that landing page, that lead magnet that you set up. So it's really cool. Like you can open up all these little avenues into other people's worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that analogy too. The little
Thanks.
windows. When you're pitching for a partnership, whether it was Gemma or anyone else, what's the structure to a great pitch? Because it sounds like you're
Mm.
landing a lot of these.
I like to land a lot of them. That's what it comes down to. I like to land a lot of them. Yeah, basically, I kind of think of like a pitch as having like three kind of main parts, and then there's like bridges. So you can kind of think of the parts as like islands, and then you have bridges like connecting them. So really, the first part is like your hook. That's like the attention grabber, right? Like you always hear about the hook, and you're trying to get their attention.
Hmm.
But in the hook, you want to build connection threads. And I actually picked this up from Brian when I was part of Growth University. He was talking about building a connection. And I started thinking of it as you can layer in threads and kind of weave them together to make a stronger connection. So if you don't really know someone, you want to weave together more connection threads so you don't come off looking at some weirdo on the internet. So weave together more ways that you're connected, like
Hmm.
and brag on them a little bit more, right?
Hmm.
So that's like your first island. And then you build a bridge to get to your second one, like speaking of blah, blah, blah. And then you can start talking about kind of what you want to pitch them.
Hmm.
Usually it's for me, like speaking of like cold emails have lots of entrepreneurs freaked out about sending them, a lot like getting on stage or whatever. So you kind of like tie it back to your first island. Then your second island, you kind of talk about like that problem and set yourself up as the solution.
Hmm.
And then your third island is actually like the solution, like, hey, I can help you with this. I'd love to do a webinar. I'd love to do a podcast pitch, whatever your pitch is. And then your last thing is like a quick call to action, like, are you interested?
Hmm.
And then sign off. Yeah.
Just short and sweet there at the end too.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to keep it long at the end.
Cool. What do most people get wrong then? Because so that's like the A plus version. What do most people
Right.
get wrong, and what does that look like?
The thing that most people get wrong is they don't answer the question for their recipient of what's in it for me. And
Hmm.
it's like a natural human question. And it's one that I probably answered for you in my pitch email to you, which is like, well, why should I care? Why would I let Laura come on and talk to, my people? Like, so if you answer that question for your recipient in every part of your email, it makes it a lot easier for them to say yes. And sometimes you can explicitly say it, like the win for you is X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
or you can say, hey, like I was a former client of yours and I got really awesome results. And that can be part of your connection thread building at the beginning as well. So you just have to answer that question. And I hear a lot of podcast hosts and partnership people talking about this. Like nobody answers that question. They write it all about like, well, what's in it for me as the writer? They don't care about you.
Yeah.
Answer the question for your recipient because that's who they care about. Yeah.
That's a really good point. A lot of self-focused
Yeah.
emails out there for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So
Good way to put it.
what I want to circle back now to the mindset issue because you mentioned
Cool.
again that people are just afraid to send cold email.
Yeah.
And like one, why are they afraid? And then two, how do you help your coaching clients get over that?
Yeah, really good question. So first, why you're afraid, it actually goes back to more brain psychology. And there's like this little part in your brain, they call it the lizard brain. It's because it's the most ancient self-protecting part of your brain. And it's the part of your brain that says, don't stand out, don't get lost, don't lose the crowd, don't go climbing off that cliff. That fire's hot. It's built to protect you. And so back when we were living in caves and building fires and getting chased by lions and mammoths and who knows what, that part of your brain kept you alive. But now it hasn't really updated its software. So it sees fear in lots of different spots, particularly in the spot where you standing out is a problem.
Hmm.
Because if you think about it, if you stood out from the crowd, you don't have to outrun the bear, as the saying goes. You just have to outrun the slowest person. So your brain is saying, don't be that slow person. And by sending a cold email, you are intentionally being that slow person. You're hanging back. You're not part of the crowd. You're standing out. And so your brain freaks out. And so that's where the fear comes in. So if you can calm that part, it's actually part of your parasympathetic nervous system.
Hmm.
So you can calm it with like deep breathing. You can dance it out. That's like one of my favorites. You can do meditation, but actually the breathing triggers your parasympathetic nervous system and calms it down really quickly for you. So you can do like box breathing. You can just do like deep breath and then exhale and focus on the exhale and do like that 3 times. Or you can just realize like this is part of the process and kind of experiment with like different ways. Basically, it all kind of boils down to like moving your body and like getting out that energy.
Hmm.
So if you're feeling super freaked, like go for a walk, like change the scene, schedule the send on the cold email, that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of different things. I actually just wrote about this in an email to my list. So there's a blog post on my website that there's a couple different aspects where you can kind of work it through. But yeah, it's really interesting. And just if you realize it's part of the process, it's not quite as scary. You just are like, okay, I'm on the right path. Like this
For
is
sure.
normal and I'm just going to move forward and figure out how I can deal with it best.
Hmm. That's interesting that there's legitimate physical things that you can do to get
Oh yeah.
yourself in a better state. And maybe it diminishes. You said you still experience it to some degree, but I'm sure
Yeah.
it diminishes once you get familiar in the rhythm.
I would hope so, but it really it really comes down to like what are the thoughts that you're telling yourself.
Hmm.
Brooke Castillo, the founder of the Life Coach School, she talks a lot about how your thoughts impact your feelings. And so
Hmm.
once you realize that, um, see if you can change your thoughts. Like, see if you can reframe the fear. Like, this is just the other side of excitement. Fear is just the other side of excitement. Like, I'm just super excited about potentially meeting this person, or I'm super excited about telling this person what kinds of big things that they did for me in my life. So if you can like reframe it or figure out a different thought instead of like this panicking feeling, um, it's really helpful. And then if you can kind of like move the emotion, whatever fear it is, outside from your body into outside, you'll also feel a lot better. So that's kind of where the physical aspect comes in.
Hmm. That's super interesting. And
Yeah, it is.
thanks for diving into that. That's
Yeah, you're
fantastic.
welcome.
I think, I mean, another place people probably experience fear even once they've sent the cold email is actually executing on the partnership.
Hmm.
So, what for you are the keys to executing well in a partnership to make sure people book calls or get your lead magnet? And maybe one step further than that is how are you following up with them once they do?
Yeah, yeah. So a good point of executing is to make sure that you're talking about specifics in however you're showing up for your partnership. Like they want to hear stories, they want you to be a person. And so some of that comes from practice. Like my podcast interviews now are vastly different from my podcast interviews 5 years ago. Um, but a large part of it is like if you haven't done a partnership, just do one. It's kind of like riding a bike. The first time is really scary, but you realize like you won't kill yourself. You'll probably be okay and you can get up and do it again because you did it the first time.
Hmm.
So part of it is that. Part of it is being really specific. Kind of part of it is like preparation. Like in prep of this interview, I actually asked you for what questions you would be asking me so I could kind of think about them because I wasn't really sure what we'd be talking about.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure, just ask. They're not gonna, your partner is not gonna begrudge you or yell at you for asking. They're actually probably going to appreciate that you're taking it seriously.
What's the right way to follow up with new people who are joining your list, or how do you treat them?
Yeah. Yeah. So really, I set it up usually with just like a lead magnet.
Mm,
So they go to a landing page, super easy, no friction involved, make it really easy for them to give you your email address.
yeah.
And then I put them into a welcome email sequence. And at the time of this recording, I'm redoing my email sequence based on changes that are happening in my business. But really, you want to, it's kind of like dating, I guess is the best analogy.
Hmm.
Um, I haven't dated in a long time, but I remember from like 25 million years ago that you kind of get obsessed with someone right at the beginning, and it's kind of like hot and intense. And then your interest, depending on how that goes, sometimes can wane and you kind of fall into a pattern, right? So you can think of your email sequence like that, where this person just signed up and they want to know a lot about you. They have all these questions about this person that they saw via their trusted source of
Hmm.
information. And they're really interested in what you're about and what you're doing and how you can potentially help them and all this stuff. So think about that and also think about they might not be ready to take action. Research has actually shown that most people don't buy in the first 90 days of getting on your list. So, how can you both help the people who are ready to take action and then kind of start a relationship? So, if they're not ready in 3 or 4 or 6 months, they are ready because they've created this relationship with you. For me, a lot of that comes down to storytelling, sharing stories, talking about my my life and kind of where I'm at and where I started and how I got here, because I know a lot of
Hmm.
people want what I have, like this life work balance and how I figured out how to make it work, and
Hmm.
this idea that I have that you don't have to throw a lot of hours to get a lot of money out on the other side. And does this actually work? And tell me more about this. So how can you answer those questions for your new people?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, I think I'm curious just for you've been doing partnerships. It sounds like 5 years into the partnership strategy specifically, maybe a little bit more. If you had to put a number on it, how much revenue has that accounted for in your business since you started doing them?
Yeah, I think it was about a year ago. I added it all up, and it came to about $230,000. Yeah,
Wow.
and that's also like with the little asterisk of during that entire time, I've also been building a family. So it's not with regular 40-hour weeks, it's with
Yeah.
3 maternity leaves. And I want to make that super clear because I think there's a lot of confusion in the industry that you have to work really, really hard, put in a lot of hours to make a certain revenue. And also B, people don't really disclose what's going on
Yeah.
outside of their life, and maybe what kind of hope that they have. And yeah, I want to be super clear about that.
Yeah. No, totally true. Most case studies never come with any kind of personal life disclosures, do they? um, Whenever you see those interviews. So yeah, tell me about your strategy for how you're organizing your schedule and like how you design your work to be on that journey to 200K in 10 hours a week or less, because that's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, it's I'm not sure yet. I haven't figured it all out. I'm still definitely in the trenches and figuring things out. And a lot of it comes down to asking myself this really great question that I picked up from Kate Northrup a couple years back. And I think she attributed it to someone else. I don't remember who, but the question is like, if you had to focus on like one thing, what's the number one trigger that you would have to pull to make your big goal happen? What
Hmm.
would that be? And so every year I ask myself that question, like, what is that thing that's fueling most of my growth? What's fueling most of my revenue? And every year it comes back to cold emails and pitching and partnerships.
Hmm.
So every year I focus more on that. So I know what's working based off of like I keep a daily spreadsheet, track my hours, figure out like where those hours are going.
Hmm.
And I find that helps me keep on task most of all. The other part is putting really strict boundaries around my work. So I actually have like work hours. Like when we're recording this, this is one of my work hours. And then I have like another chunk of time at bedtime after the kids go to bed. But knowing that I have like 1 hour to get this list done makes you super motivated, first
Hmm.
of all. And then the second thing is putting that boundary in place helps me figure out like what are the priorities? What's the one thing that I have to do this week to make everything else fall in line, to make
Yeah.
everything else easier, right? And so I think once you put boundaries in place around your work and you are consistent with those boundaries, I think a lot of things will kind of unfold for you. And
Hmm.
it hurts. You want to like throw more hours at work because it feels really good. You feel like productive. But I
Hmm.
think that there's a certain threshold where your brain can't do anything more after about like 3 hours of, say, deep work. So if you
Yeah.
had to reduce your workday into like 2 to 3 hours, what would you focus on? That's really the question that I've been asking myself for the past like 7 years.
Wow. That's a great question too, because
Yeah.
I bet if most people really looked at their day, there's a couple hours that really matter, and the rest really could have gone without.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to be at your laptop to be working. You can like
hmm.
start a project, stop it, and let your brain kind of work and hum in the background and like percolate like a coffee maker. So then when you're ready to come back to work, you're like, here, I've like written out this email kind of in my head. I've already got like the intro, I've already got like the call to action. And now I just have to fill in the bits and it kind of writes itself. But it's because you've given yourself space. And I
Hmm.
think that's really key.
That's fantastic. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people would benefit from that approach.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's awesome. I just have one final question for you, but
Sure.
it's um, like what's next for you, and what are you focusing on right now to get closer to that dream outcome that you were talking about?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something I've haven't really been thinking about. It
Hmm.
sounds funny, but I think a lot of times like you kind of get like lost in the daily checklist kind of thing.
Mhm.
So to answer that question, I would say staying committed and consistent,
Hmm.
which is super hard. I definitely have the personality where it's like, oh, shiny object, like let's go this way, let's try that, let's. And I like to have lots of ideas, and I like to execute on them quickly, but that also kind of causes some muddiness. So I think the biggest challenge for me is staying consistent and moving forward with basically pitching partnerships. Yeah. So if you're watching this and you like what I'm saying, please email me. I would love to explore a partnership with you.
That's awesome. Yeah. So where can everyone find you and learn more about your business?
Yeah, just go to lauralopuch.com, just my name, and you can find out there. You can sign up for my email list. I am definitely not active on social media, but my emails, that's where I love to connect with people. So if you want to hear more about me, I would strongly recommend you sign up for my email list.